Ever get that, like, surprise boost when you see a little extra cash in your account that, whoa, where'd this come from feeling?
Yeah, definitely. A nice little bonus can make a real difference.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into something that could potentially put more of that found money feeling in your pocket.
We've been digging into some really interesting research, analyzing how economic help has worked in the past, and suggesting a totally different approach, one that could lead to more effective support when things get tough.
So instead of spreading things out thin, today's deep dive is all about what's being called targeted stimulus checks. The idea is to move away from those broad, one size fits all checks and get more direct, focused financial help where it's needed most.
It's about really honing in on who needs help and how to deliver it in the most impactful way.
Right. So, our mission today is to really understand what this proposed change is all about and, most importantly, what it could mean for your wallet.
Yeah, we'll unpack the core arguments behind this idea and explore the potential financial benefits for you.
So, this whole discussion about targeted stimulus really gained steam as we look back at the economic roller coaster of the past few years. A lot of people, especially those on low and fixed incomes, face some real challenges.
Absolutely. And the question became, how do we provide support that truly makes a difference, especially for those who need it most?
And that leads us right into the core of our source material today. We're talking about a study that took a really close look at the big stimulus checks that went out back in 2020 and 2021. Remember those?
I think just about everyone remembers those. It felt like checks were flying out to everyone.
It was almost like, who didn't get a check? But seriously, the study points out that a whopping 85% of the population received those checks. While they were definitely intended to boost the economy, this blanket approach has come under some scrutiny.
Yeah, 85%, that's a huge portion of the population. It makes you wonder about the overall cost and whether it was really the most efficient way to go about it.
Right. Spreading the money so widely had to come with a hefty price tag.
It did. The study estimates those 3 rounds of stimulus checks cost about $850 billion.
Wow, 850 billion. That's a serious chunk of change. And the study also suggests a possible link between all that money flooding the system and the inflation that followed. They estimate those checks may have contributed to about 3% of the inflation we saw.
Right, because essentially you had a lot more money out there chasing the same amount of goods and services, which can push prices up.
That makes sense. So we've got a massive amount of money going out to almost everyone, likely providing some immediate relief, but with potential downsides like contributing to inflation. Now, this is where the study gets really interesting. They bring up this concept called MPC, which stands for marginal propensity to consume. Sounds a little jargony, but it's actually a key piece of their argument. Can you break down what MPC is all about?
Sure, so MPC basically measures how likely someone is to spend any extra money they get. What's really important here is that this likelihood of spending, this MPC, actually varies depending on how much money someone makes.
Okay, so people at different income levels might handle extra money in different ways. What did this study find about this connection between income and how people spend?
They found a clear pattern. People with lower incomes tend to have a higher MPC. That means if they get an extra dollar, or in this case a stimulus check, they're much more likely to spend it, and spend it pretty quickly, usually on things they need. On the other hand, folks with higher incomes generally have a lower MPC. They might save that extra money or use it to pay down debt.
So if we think about those potential $2,000 monthly checks aimed specifically at lower income folks, how does the study predict that money would be spent based on what we know about MPC?
Well, the study suggests that someone with a lower income, who we know tends to have a higher MPC, would likely spend about 80% of that $2,000, which is $1,600, within the first 10 days of getting it.
Wow, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, and then they predict that the remaining 20%, about $400, would likely get spent over the next month. So essentially, within about 30 days, that whole $2,000 has circulated back into the economy.
And that quick spending is what stimulus is all about, right? Getting money moving and supporting all kinds of businesses.
Exactly. It's about injecting money directly into the economy. And people with a high MPC do that naturally because they tend to spend a larger portion of their income on everyday needs. Think about it. Groceries, gas, clothes, childcare, haircuts, all those things help keep businesses running and people employed.
So the money isn't just sitting in a savings account, it's actively flowing through the economy. Now, what about those folks with a lower MPC, those higher income earners who also got those big stimulus checks? How did they tend to use that money?
The study suggests that when higher income individuals receive a sudden influx of cash, they're more likely to save it or use it to chip away at their debts, which, are smart financial moves, but they don't have that same immediate stimulative effect.
Right, it's not flowing back into the economy as quickly or directly. Okay, so we've looked at how the broad approach played out and this concept of MPC. What's the big takeaway from the study? What are they suggesting as a better way to handle economic downturns in the future?
Their main finding is that instead of relying on those big one-time stimulus checks, we might be better off using targeted, ongoing monthly payments, maybe something like $2,000 a month, specifically for people with lower incomes.
So, a more focused and consistent approach, what are the potential advantages of doing it this way?
Well, the study highlights a few key benefits. First, it could cost the government a lot less than those $850 billion stimulus packages because the money would be going to a smaller group of people.
That makes sense. Less money going out overall.
Right. And second, the impact on the economy could be just as strong, if not stronger, because the money is going to those who are most likely to spend it quickly.
So, a more efficient use of funds.
Exactly. And third, instead of a one-time boost, this approach would provide consistent support over several months, giving people a more stable financial footing during tough times.
So, a more reliable safety net.
Exactly. The study does acknowledge that there would be some challenges in setting up a system like this. For example, figuring out exactly who qualifies as low income and making sure the money gets distributed efficiently.
Right, the logistics could get a little tricky.
Yeah, but they argue that these are manageable hurdles compared to the inefficiencies of the broad approach.
So, it's about being more precise and strategic with how we provide support.
Exactly. The study presents a strong case for this targeted method, saying it's a more logical and potentially more effective way to respond to economic challenges. It really takes into account what we learned from those previous stimulus measures, especially the inflation that followed.
So, to sum it up for our listeners, the study we've been discussing found that a good chunk of the money from those big stimulus checks ended up being saved by higher earners, which limited their immediate impact on the economy. They're proposing a shift towards targeted monthly payments for lower income folks who are much more likely to spend that money quickly, which could boost the economy more efficiently and potentially at a lower overall cost.
That's a great summary of the study's main points.
So, what could this mean for you? Well, if you're someone with a lower income, this analysis suggests that in the future, economic help during tough times might look a lot different. Instead of a one-time check, you might see more consistent support in the form of monthly payments.
And even if you're not in that lower income bracket, this study highlights the potential for creating more effective and less inflationary economic policies, which benefits everyone in the long run.
It really emphasizes the importance of understanding how people at different income levels react to financial assistance and tailoring policies accordingly. So here's a final thought to leave you with. As we move forward, think about the broader implications of this idea. Targeted monthly support versus broad one-time payments. What does this mean for the stability of our economy and the long-term financial well-being of individuals? Is it better to get help to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, or is it more effective to provide focused, sustained assistance to those who are most likely to keep the economy moving? It's a big question with potentially huge implications for how we navigate future economic challenges. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore more fascinating topics.